Okay, we're good. Good evening. Today is Monday, April 3rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. We are in the Brecksville Broadview Heights Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of approving a contract with Finding Leaders and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There will be no public participation at this meeting. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. Please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Item 1B, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1C, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Mack? Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, just a note, Kathleen was not feeling well this morning, so she passed on our meeting. Item 2A, Finding Leaders contract. Resolve to approve the Finding Leaders contract as attached. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
So before we get into the vote, what we wanted to do is have a little bit of an explanatory session. We have Finding Leaders representatives here. And just for the community, we know that hiring a superintendent is extremely important, and many of our public are engaging in this process, which is great. The Board of Education has two direct hires, superintendent and treasurer, and arguably one of our most important responsibilities is to ensure that we hire a good superintendent and a good treasurer. So we're well aware of the importance of this effort. Fortunately, for this board, we also have experience in this process. Ellen was on the board when we went through it the last time and hired Craig Yanaglos, who we're extremely pleased with. And Kathleen and I have been on the board over 11 years, and this will be our 5th time through the process, all working with Finding Leaders. So rest assured, the board has experience in these matters, and we look forward to going through the process and hopefully finding a great candidate to lead our district moving forward. So with that, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Ed and Steve from Finding Leaders. Are going to give a little background. This is more for the public. The board's aware of a lot of this information, but we wanted to be fully transparent, give the public some background on Finding Leaders, who they are, and then kind of walk through what process we have, which is a bit of an expedited timeline given where we're at in the calendar, but also reassure everyone that we feel extremely confident that we'll get a great pool of candidates and that we're not too late to the game to start this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed and Steve.
If you could just make sure that the green light is on, push the button. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? It's all right. My name is Steve Farnsworth. Thank you for allowing us to come and talk with you. Finding Leaders was started by former superintendent Paul Pendleton about 25 years ago. And it was started primarily to help boards of education search for superintendents at that time. It has grown a lot since then. We now do searches all over the state of Ohio. We still focus on Northeast Ohio. Most of our searches are here, but we also have expanded not just superintendents, but treasurers, sometimes principals, central office people, and then we've even ventured off into the private sector to help with businesses from time to time, find leaders for their particular business. I think if you could put up the schools that, there we go. there's a partial list of some of the schools that we've helped, and feel free to call any of those and check our references. I think you'll find that the thing that sets Finding Leaders apart over all these years has been that we don't just come in and do the job. We try to get to know the board. We work alongside the board. We're with the board every step of the way. And our purpose is to not only give you outstanding candidates from which to pick, but after you select a superintendent or a treasurer, to actually work with the board and make sure that that transition goes smoothly. The other hallmark of Finding Leaders is the engagement process. And I think that Ed's going to talk a little bit about that. That's really, really important so that we engage those people who are going to be impacted by the selection that you make. This is one of the most important decisions that you'll make as a board. It might be the most important decision. And I just want to say that if you'll look at that brief resume that I gave you, put in front of you, you'll see that I have been a teacher, a principal. I was a superintendent for 26 years. And you'll notice that highlighted one, I was at Brecksville Broadview Heights as your superintendent from 98 to 2006. Those were 8 very, very good years for me. We had great board members at the time, as you all are. I brought some pictures in. Some of you who have been here in this community for a while might recognize some of those people. Norm Klopp, Terry Neff, Delane Wisner, Ann Rittman, Clark Reckemer, Alan Scheifler, George Blasco, and others. They were very, very good people. They had a great working relationship as a Board of Education. They knew their role and they worked hard. They put a lot of time in. And I know that you are doing the same thing. I just wanted you to realize and honor the work that they've done. And now that you have the opportunity before you to select a superintendent, the next leader, that together this leader and you will move this district and help it grow into the future to be even better than it has been. So I thank you for allowing us to be here. I wish you all the best. I'll turn it over to Ed now, and he can talk to you a little bit about the process.
Thanks, Steve. And Steve's been in education almost as long as I've been around. Huh? Actually, a little bit about my background. This is personal. I think it's not often that you get an opportunity to have a personal investment in this aspect of doing superintendent searches. A little bit about my background. All in Northeastern Ohio. I was a teacher, counselor, assistant principal in the Twinsburg district. Went to Medina. I was in Medina for 5 years, got the unique opportunity to start a middle school from scratch, from 1 junior high to 2 middle schools. Came back to Independence and was the middle school principal and assistant to the superintendent. And then my home community is North Royalton, and came back as middle school principal and then superintendent of schools. And I retired there in 2013. I tell the story, and I know some of the board members have heard this before, but the reality was I was enjoying being a superintendent, and I thought we were doing some really good work. Came home from a meeting and realized that's when the retirement rules had changed. And so I went to a meeting in Columbus, excited about being the superintendent of North Royalton, and drove home having to call my board president and say, I think I have to retire. And at that point, we had a lot of discussions about where I was going and what the board wanted me to do, from retire, rehire, and some other things like that. And I felt we had done some really, really good things, and pretty faithful person, thought this was a good opportunity. My wife was scared, at that point. I think she was scared of me being home with her. I think I would have been great in retirement. She didn't agree. So I had the opportunity to be the principal at my church where my grandkids now go to school. So I'm at St. Albert the Great School in North Royalton. But I said before that I had said I wanted to work with Finding Leaders because I had been part of a Finding Leaders search. I was hired in a Finding Leaders search. I said, if I ever retired, and I thought it would be a long time at that point, I like the way they do things. I love the engagement process. I love the way that the board and the community and the relationships that are developed are special. And so our pastor was allowed me to do that along with being the principal. I told him I'd be there 5 years. This is 10 years. So I get to interject. We have a large number. We do have a number of kids from the Brecksville Broadview Heights School District. A couple of years ago, I was asked by the Assumption parents when it was set to close to help out and keep it open. And so now it is St. Albert the Great at Assumption Academy. I get paid $10 a year to do that. So I'm getting really paid what I'm worth. But in all seriousness, I've been on both sides of the Catholic education. I love my role in public education, and especially in Brecksville Broadview Heights, because as you know, North Royalton City Schools, although we don't have Broadview Heights in the name in North Royalton, we share Broadview Heights. And so I had a great relationship during the time that I was superintendent with Scott Prebles, and we worked together in the communities. We had meetings together. So I think I know this district. It's also nice to be 10 or 15 minutes away, and you really know this community. I think there's a lot of similarities in the community. So it is personal. Maybe not quite as personal as Steve, of having been in the chair in the superintendency. So I think you get a unique blend with the two of us of folks that are committed not only to doing the searches. I'm now the lead consultant, so I get an opportunity to choose if I want to do the search or not. And when they come up, and this was something I really wanted to do. I think this is a great opportunity for your next superintendent. The first thing that we do as you go through this process is I'll share with you with the components. A big part of it is, and we probably could just use this one, is centered around relationships. And it starts with the relationships with the Board of Education. We're going to develop a relationship with the community. We have focus groups that we have scheduled coming up, and this board has chosen to have a very engaged process, which is really the hallmark of, as Steve said, of our business. That's what we believe makes us different, is that we want to engage the community, and it's a great opportunity for the board and the community that the superintendent has a nice lead into their superintendency, because they've met the community and the community's been a part of the process. Not to select the superintendent, but a part of the process. To select it is the board's job. But it's relationships that we have with the board. We will have it, we'll get that relationship with the community. We also have relationships with candidates. As Steve said, great superintendents aren't looking at the want ads every day. They're busy doing the good work, and other central office folks and treasurers, we find the same thing. They're so busy doing the work that it takes a phone call. It says, it takes one of us saying, I think this would be a great job. And what I was saying at the beginning, a big thing that I know, integrity is a big thing to both of us. That's why I love working with Steve, is I like to be able to tell a candidate, or I don't want to do the search, I would like to take this job. This is a good job. I would want to be the superintendent here. And I'm telling you with all sincerity, this is a great job. And so it really is a great opportunity, because recruitment is a big part of it. Really and truly, you really have to go out to find good candidates. And the good news is Brecksville helps sell itself. The Brecksville Broadview Heights School District has an outstanding reputation. You've had a long run of great success. And so I think it does pique people's interest, but it may take a phone call from one of us, and it may be more detailed information about the district and what makes it special. So it is a critical decision that Mark started at the very beginning, and I think Steve mentioned. We're ready to announce it very quickly, but quite honestly, in 2023, people know where there's openings. A lot of superintendents are aware already, but I think there's already a brochure ready to be developed, and we'll certainly get that out to let people know what it is. Engagement, we have the focus group set. The recruitment starts right away for us, and that's the most important part of our job, is going out, looking and matching what your community is saying you want. We've already talked to the board about what you're looking for in the next superintendent, and match up those areas, because it's not about finding the best superintendent. It's about finding the best superintendent for Brecksville Broadview Heights. And that may sound similar, but they're very different. It's not like we're taking candidates and moving them from spot to spot. That's not how it is. It really has to be a good fit. It has to match up with what your community has developed in the profile, and most important, what the Board of Education has determined, that knows the job very, very well, what you're looking for in the next superintendent. What is also different is we'll be with the board for the interviews, not to run the interviews, but to take all the heavy lifting away. We're calling the candidates, we're setting all that up. we're helping facilitate the dialogue afterwards, not to ask the questions, but to help the board do that. Not because the board can't do it, because you've got some pretty experienced board members, but because we do it all the time, we can help you to facilitate that dialogue as you're starting to go through it. Again, not to make the selection, but to help you with that dialogue. So we'll be with the board for that round. We will not send anyone to the Board of Education. We'll recommend candidates to the board. None of them will come to the board that we haven't interviewed ourselves. We'll make a recommendation of these. We think these people fit your profile the best. The board will know everyone that's applied, and you'll have a chance to go from there. Due diligence we've done, and we'll tell the board to continue to do it. You've elected to do the last part of the process, to have the stakeholders engagement, and that is wonderful. We really believe that this is a really big part of a finding leader search, and you had a choice. And some boards don't choose to do that, and I think it's sad when it doesn't happen, only because you miss out on a good opportunity for the community to see the superintendent in action, the board to see these potential superintendent candidates interact with the community. And we do it a little different. If you remember engagement, in some places you see rooms and maybe they go and talk to the teachers and they talk to the principals and they talk to the administrators. They will be all together as part of that stakeholder engagement. So there will be a group of members that will be invited, that the board's inviting in to be part of that interview process. And the board will be listening during that point in the process and hear the different aspects of the community, from the PTO to the administrators, to the business community, or whoever that you've involved in the stakeholders. And then the last part, the board will have another interview. So you see there's a many pieces to it. So that's just a glimpse into the process, but the board, you will have multiple interviews, but you'll also see them in 3 different areas. One in the first interview, then in the stakeholders, and then again with your final interview. I think Steve talked about the transition. We will give a transition plan to your next superintendent to help them to make the adjustment. We take this seriously. We're not walking away. When the contract's done, after we've done the superintendent, we're going to do a retreat to help you ahead of time to get used to whose job is whose, what lane is everyone in, how are we going to communicate, how are we going to work together. Again, things that aren't necessarily right or wrong answers, but that you have a chance to decide how you're going to work together, because you're going to spend a lot of time together and you're going to be making a lot of important decisions together. And it's nice to know how you're going to work together. So that's really the cycle as we go through it. And if you see the timetable that we've established, and I know the question is going to be, can we do this? What is the time? And this is not late in the process. It makes us be a little tighter on it, but you're really not late. It's when we start getting into the summer, post-June. If you start doing searches post-June, it becomes a little more challenging and a little more difficult for superintendents. So by having a pretty tight timeline, I think the good news is Brecksville, Broadview Heights, the recruiting process is a little bit better because it's a desirable position. So you see, we picked up some time. We're doing the focus groups. There's going to be a quick turnaround time. Great advantage that your spring break already took place. So, you know, we're actually having the interview, the focus groups would be scheduled for April the 11th, and those will be out there. We'll begin advertising the position right after the contract is signed. We can start advertising it, put it on our many spots, and that will be nationally. K-12 Job Spot will actually make that application go throughout the entire country. So certainly throughout the whole state of Ohio. There's a brochure which is already being worked on. I put April, but it's pretty ambitious. I've been pretty impressed with communications. He's already got things rolling there. The application deadline is April 28th. So that might be a little bit longer if we were starting earlier, but it's plenty of time, because especially when you're looking, you can attract experienced candidates. So I think we will be talking to folks, and it just tightens down that time. And people generally apply early on and tell us they're interested, or they do it towards the end, whatever that deadline is. So we really think, although it's a little quicker than normal, it's well within reason for a good search. That's where it gets tighter. We're going to turn around. We will already have started our interviews before it closes. So we will take it all the way up to the 28th, but there's no reason, if someone has applied ahead of that date and we know we're interested in them, we'll have all those interviews done prior. And then if any come in at the last minute, we still have enough time to get them interviewed before we make,
And just to clarify for the community members that are listening, the we are using now is finding leaders.
Correct. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, we as finding leaders will have done our first round of vetting out the candidates to obviously make sure that the board is getting the people that best fit the profile. And we will give the board the list of all the people that applied. Here are the people that we recommend. And here's why we recommend these folks and how they fit the profile for your next superintendent. And here are all the people we interviewed. So you'll have all of that available to you as a Board of Education. That's the first. We'll share that on May 1st, the week of May 8th. Will be when you have 2 nights of interviews. We generally say 6 is a good number. It could be 5, it could be 7. There's going to be a magic number. What we say, I think Steve and I have been through enough of these together. There's a natural break we find at some point. And rather than just have a set number and say, well, we said we're going to have 6. If 5 is where the natural break is, we'll tell you here's 5. If we can't cut it off at 6 because it's 7, we'll tell you 7. So we'll just give you, usually it's 6. It's usually a pretty good number. It's a number of folks to interview. And then the following week will be the second round interviews, which is where the stakeholders as part of the evening will be seeing 2 candidates. We recommend you go from 6 to 2. And usually it's a good breaking point, and we will help you process that. The board will help you process those 6 candidates, if that's whatever the number is, to get down to the 2 that you think you want to take to the community as part of the stakeholders, and then your final interview that will take place. And I think you set some dates. I want to say 17th, 18th, something like that. And we're looking to turn around the contract. Now I'm going to share that with you, and I think it's important to know because you may follow in other locations when they do searches. Oftentimes you will hear that they get the candidates and then they start the negotiation with who that person is, and there's a drag. What we have done and will do with you is establish where is it, how much are you going to pay your superintendent, what is it, where will they be, so that at the end they know they've already talked to their significant other, they've already looked at the community. There's not the decision to be made after you're offered the position. They don't come to that final interview without knowing that if they're offered the job, that they're going to accept the job, and the terms will already be part of that. They will already have seen the contract. They will already have seen the numbers that would be associated with it, so that they can say very quickly that they could say yes after you finish the interview process, and this new superintendent could be introduced to the community. We said August 1st or earlier if possible. The reason we always put that in there is sometimes what happens is if superintendents are leaving one district or another, sometimes there's a chance where, they would release their superintendent. And if, depending upon what your situation is, if the new district wants that sometimes it's something that works out. I know that I started in North Royalton in the middle of, probably not in the middle, probably the beginning of June, I think, because the superintendent was hired in another district and they wanted him, and North Royalton was okay with me moving into the position. So that's why we say earlier, if possible. There's also some transition involved in the transition plan, board updates by finding leaders. So that's the quick run through on the timeline. It's a pretty tight timeline, but it's well within reason. We've done them much quicker. We wouldn't even call this an expedited. We've done some searches that we call expedited, and this wouldn't even be an expedited. This is just aggressive, just moving, avoiding some of the big, like instead of a 2-week gap between the round of with the board to the second round, you have 1 week. So those are the things where you gain time, maybe a little more time in the applications.
So Ed, one of the things that the board had brought up before, given that it's a tight timeline, but it's very doable, the board had expressed concern about the quality of the candidate pool at this stage of the game. And maybe could you share your thoughts on what we can expect from a candidate pool, even though it's, we're still in the window, the hiring window for transitioning superintendents.
And you're already hiring us, so I'm not saying this just, you're Brexville Broadview Heights, okay? It's a very, very desirable position. And so truly there are candidates, as soon as this started, people know we've worked before. People have already called. We've already had contacts. It's already up and running that people are interested. So I'm not worried at all about the candidate pool. In fact, I'm excited about the potential candidate pool. I don't know that it's going to be any stronger. It would have been any stronger had you been a little bit earlier than this. It's just going to mean that it's going to be a quicker. It's actually kind of nice for a candidate because that process leaves a community, especially if you're looking at a sitting superintendent. Their district's in a little bit of a holding pattern while that superintendent goes through the search process. So the fact that it's tighter is very appealing to superintendents because one way or another, they're going to know in a relatively short period that we close on the 28th, and a couple weeks later, you're going to know if they're the next superintendent. So they're not holding their district, and I don't mean that they're doing it on purpose, but it is a little uneasy if you don't know if your superintendent's going to be leaving.
I'd just echo the same thing, what Ed said. This is Brecksville, Bellevue Heights, and it's a great school district. And frankly, you pay well, and that's important too. All of that's important. It's a combination of all those things. So we have people contacting us. People know that I was here. They want to know what I thought of the community, and I give them those glowing comments that I feel from my heart. So you won't have any trouble attracting really top-notch candidates for this position.
Some of the factors too, there's two questions they ask us. What's the Board of Education like? Okay. And what's the treasurer like? And those are huge selling points that you have working for you, I think, as a Board of Education, and what you want, your heart is in with the kids. And that doesn't mean that any candidate thinks they're going to get 100% approval all the time with everything that's going on, but that you're here for the school district and you want this to be the best school district that it can be. And when you have some length of service together with some new service, that's exciting. That's exciting. The other appealing piece, I'll be very honest with you, is your building project is complete. So some folks if you have to pass a building project, that's a lot to come into. You don't get much of a honeymoon when you're saying, okay, now tomorrow, keep in mind, we got to get this bond issue passed, or we got to get this operating levy passed. Neither one of which you have to do here. That's very appealing. I'm just being honest. Some superintendents would like the opportunity to settle in, get to know the community, get to know the folks that work here, have a little bit of and I want to say a honeymoon because I don't know that it's that, but at least an opportunity to not get thrown right into trying to get a levy passed or to try to, open up buildings or do any of those things that are challenges. They come with the job, but if you don't have to worry about that piece, that's a valuable piece as well.
Good. Any questions?
I have one, and it's kind of just general. I'm the newest member sitting at the table, and going through OSBA training, learning to fit in my role as a board member. It's interesting to hear across the state people talk about how hard it is to find that right fit superintendent, and that it is. And so I kind of wanted your response to that, in that I believe that sometimes the perception is that there's superintendents, there's plethora of them out there that are just kind of lined up waiting to come to a job, and that, striking while the iron's hot, you kind of need to do that and move forward so that you get the right leader for your district. Am I
You're
correct?
on target. It all depends upon the district. The only shortage of outstanding candidates where it's even thinner is in the treasurer's position. There's even less, it's a tough job. It's a really, really tough job. And to get quality leadership, it's challenging. But what I would tell you, Tish, is that it matters where those districts are. It's a lot harder in some districts than in others, depending upon what's happening in that community. What do they expect from their superintendent? What's happening in the schools? What type of district is it like? I'd tell you one other thing, because you said you're newly on the board. I would tell you what's kind of exciting is as much work as being doing a search is, it also does bring a board together. And so it speeds up the process for you that sometimes a new board member doesn't have. You have to learn kind of as you go along. I think going through a search process is a good way to come together as a board, to look at what do you really value? What do you really believe in? How are we going to work together? I think it's a good opportunity for you as well as it is to get the next candidate. So I think it is a tough job. So I'm kind of taking the middle of the road. I think it is tough. It's hard to find good superintendents, but I think some of that's situational. It matters what district you are and what issues are in that district presently. How do they treat their, what's the community like? The political pieces of, Brecksville, Broadview Heights are positive there. The two mayors have both been mayors for quite some time and have a history of supporting the schools. That's a selling point as well.
So let me offer a couple of comments, and then I just want to recap for our community kind of what the process is and where they plug in. So when the board had met with finding leaders, this was before we had a contract, but it was exploratory. That's why tonight we're approving the contract. And in those discussions, we talked about the board is committed to community involvement. Where can we plug the community in to be part of this search? And so what Finding Leaders shared with us was on the front end, which is when you're developing the profile of what you want in a superintendent, you could either do focus groups or you could do a survey. And we said, can we do both? And so we're doing both. So on the front end, which is what's coming next, is there will be a one-day, April 11th, where focus groups will be held throughout the day with various groups, teachers, administrators, and non-classified. So parents, community members, there's going to be time slots, and we're going to send a communication out so people can see where they can plug in. And it's open to anybody when it gets to the community, parents, anybody can come. And Finding Leaders will facilitate the sessions. And this is, again, to garner feedback on what the profile of our new superintendent will be. The other item will be on that same day, April 11th, is we will open up a survey online, which again, anyone in the community can take this survey. Even if you attended the focus groups, you could still do the survey. And both of these mechanisms are to garner public input so that we can help develop the profile. Once we have the profile and we go out in the recruiting process, the public will have to sit on the sideline for a good part of this because it's the board's responsibility to vet the candidates, interview the candidates, and eventually get them down to 2 finalists. So I just want to set expectations for the public. Like when we do interviews of these candidates, it's not open in the public, it'll be exec session. And the reason for that, quite frankly, is a number of superintendents, they don't want it to be public that they are interviewing for a job unless they're one of the final 2. So that's why it's a private endeavor for the board to cull through the candidates, vet them out, and get to the final 2. Once we get to the final 2, that's when the second round of interviews will also include what Ed had mentioned was this stakeholders. So that's another opportunity for the public to engage in this process, but that is not open to everybody. That will be, and we haven't figured out the details yet, we're going to try to select cross-section of members from our community to be involved in that process. And that will be, again, another data point for the board. Ultimately, the board makes the call, though. The board that's our responsibility as your elected officials to make the final call. So we chose the maximum possible engagement of the community. So I want everybody to be clear on that. There will be 2 opportunities on the front end. If you can attend the focus groups on April 11th, great. If you can't, the survey will be out there. You can do the survey. That'll help us generate the profile. Once we have the profile, we're off and running with getting candidates. The board handles the interviewing on the candidates that we find are to our liking. Eventually, we get to the final 2, and then the final 2 is when we do second round interviews and we have stakeholder engagement to help the board with feedback on what they're seeing. And then hopefully we find our chosen superintendent, and we're off to the races. Is that good?
I think you can work for us. I think
Yeah.
you have the whole
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
down. You have the whole process down now.
Okay, good. So again, we really are looking forward to the community being engaged, and we provided every possible option that we can to let them be engaged. So we thank our community for all of their interest in this and their participation. And we're looking forward to getting this thing going. We will be sending out a communication, I think, tomorrow to the district community, the email list that goes out explaining this process. And also this agenda item and the documents that you saw up there, these are all attached to the agenda item for this meeting. So anybody who wants to see this timeline, wants to see some background information on finding leaders, wants to see the contract we're signing with them, it's all out there. It's all transparent. You're welcome to go out there and see it. Any other thoughts, comments, questions?
I do have one question. And I'm very confident in finding leaders. I was involved in the process in 2019 when we hired Mr. Yanagloss, and that Finding Leaders did an amazing job during that process. But in the unlikely situation that the districts, that the board's not able to, everybody agree upon a candidate, like how would that affect the timeline that we have up here?
That's the timeline, but quite honestly, we want you to be satisfied. So we're not done until you find your candidate. So if we extend it, if we continue on, if you went a different route, we're in it until you get your candidate. So although I think we're pretty confident you're going to find your candidate because of already early conversations, but it's a good question, Alan. We're in it. It's not like we gave you this timeline. If you're not happy, we walk away. Now you got to go find another search. We're in it until you find your next superintendent.
And I would say, and thanks for that question, Alan, we don't anticipate this being the case, but if it should come to pass where we don't find the right fit, we're not settling. We're not going to just pick whoever's left on the list so that we can say that before the end of May, we have a superintendent. We understand the gravity of this decision and the importance of finding our next leader who hopefully will be here 5+ years or longer. So we're not going to settle, but we don't think we'll have to. We have a lot of confidence that we're going to get a great pool of candidates. And but just, for reference, if it should come to pass where something happens and the candidates don't work out, we'll keep going. We won't just settle. Anything else? Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosum.
Yes. All right, item 3A, announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for April 26th. Note, though, that we may have special board meetings if we need to as this process ramps up. Item 4A, resolve to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosum.
Yes. Thank you all for plugging in and look forward to engaging with you soon.